Welcome to AHA with Amplify. We're just going to let everybody get in. Excited to have you here on this Tuesday with us and EDC. So before we get started on today's program, I'm just going to run through a few exciting things that are happening with Amplify. So I'm going to do that in just 1 second once everybody's got themselves into the Zoom meeting for us. We appreciate you spending your lunch hour with us, and we're really excited about today's topic. So we do have Rob and Samir here to talk all things EDC. It couldn't be more timely with everything that's happening in the world today. It's a great opportunity to talk about exporting and having growth outside of Canada. So we're going to get onto that topic shortly. But before we talk to Rob and Samir about EDC and everything to do with trade and Canada, we are going to let you know about a few things that are happening here at Amplify. It is the season of recruiting. I will admit that with the politics and the economics, I was a bit worried that people wouldn't be hiring or we would see a slowdown, but good news, lots and lots of things happening in the market. Certainly temporary accountants are needed as per usual, lots of recruiting for permanent jobs as well. So the market is very busy, which is exciting to see. And of course, our fractional is a great opportunity for those business owners that realize they don't know how to forecast in times of volatility. So we're really happy to be able to support those business owners and help them with their financial strategy as well. So lots of things are happening here within Amplify, and we've got some events to support what we're seeing in the market. So the most exciting thing that's coming up is our live with AHA with Amplify. So live events sell out, as all of you know, and we have been doing this new experts at roundtable format. And one of the consequences of the new format is that the numbers have to be a little tighter and it has to be a bit more exclusive and inclusive in order to accommodate the format. But the great news is the feedback on the format has been awesome, and people are very excited about the opportunity to have interactive learning and not just your typical type of learning. So we're really excited about the live AHA with Amplify that's coming up. And I think that the topic is especially timely. So we're doing employee experience and how your brand and your teams have the ability to hire, retain, and offboard. So we have 3 experts that are coming, business affiliates that support our clients and work in the market with us. We have Shiloh Burt from Amber and Amanda HR Consulting, and we're really happy to have her join us. We have Kristen Straight. Some of you will know her because she's done an AHA with Amplify before, and she runs Synergy HR Consulting. We have our own lawyer, Spencer Chimak from McLeod Law. So we're very excited to have him as well. And then, of course, we've got a couple amplifiers because obviously when it comes to hiring and recruiting, we happen to have some expertise. So very thrilled that Lindsay and Adam will be also running some tables. So 5 experts, 5 topics, all under the umbrella of employee experience and how your brand and team can hire, retain, and offboard. So please make sure to get a spot and attend. AHA members do get first opportunity, but we are starting to share this with our newsletter participants as well as our social media participants soon. And we do anticipate it'll sell out. We've only so far shared it a little bit and it's already over half full. So if you want a spot, please make sure to sign up today, and Nikki will share that in the chat so you can do that right away. Other things that are coming up, obviously, we've got AHA with Amplify, which is our webinar series that you're here with us today for. On the 3rd Tuesday of most months, we do have the opportunity to learn together, and we're really excited about the next 2 topics. So in May, we will be talking about organizational structure, capital gains, wealth, and tax planning for business ownership. So for those of you that are finance leaders or CPAs that work in small, medium, and growth businesses, this is obviously critical for the financial strategy of the owners of those businesses. And of course, if you're a business owner, this is critical to you and your spouse and your family. So we're very happy to have this topic happening in May. And then we're going to wrap up the season with Shred. So lots of opportunities with Shred. And sometimes we believe we work with a business or an industry where that doesn't apply, similar to how sometimes we think that about EDC, actually. And the reality is these programs are often much more diverse and inclusive than we anticipate. So I really do recommend that you attend the Shred program with us in June as we wrap up the AHA with Amplify season, because you never know if it actually could be applicable to the organization that you're helping today or a future opportunity as well. So May and June, we've got wealth and capital gains and business structuring in May. June, we have Shred. And then that's it as we take July and August off in order to spend time in the beautiful temporary sun and summer of Canada. And we will return with excitement in September, the true new year, as we all know it to be. I can't believe that we're coming so close to the end of this AHA with Amplify season, and we appreciate all of your support and engagement and attendance. So last reminder, the May Live with AHA, that's crucial to sign up. It will sell out, and it does have minimal seats available due to the engaging format that we're now doing with those live events. It's networking, it's drinks, food, and it's really, really important CPD. Without further ado, let's get Samir and Rob to talk about what you're actually here to talk about. So we're going to start with a bit of an intro on EDC, on Rob and Samir, and then we're going to move into a fireside chat. And they've got a script, but they know that I don't stick to scripts. So we are going to have an opportunity to answer your questions, and you're welcome to put those in the chat at any point, and I'll get them on our agenda. And we will just have a really great conversation amongst the three of us. And I'm so excited for this timely conversation and this opportunity to have Samir and Rob help us all learn together. So thank you, all of you.
Do you want me to kick it off?
Yes, we're good to go, Rob.
Perfect. Samira, why don't I get you to go through and introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce myself and jump into the deck.
Okay, sounds good. So my name is Samir Musayev. I am a commercial account director here at EDC. I work with the Southern Alberta market. I've been with the organization for a year and a half. Before, I was for nearly 5 years with HSBC on the trade finance side, and kind of my career expands over more than 10 years working, helping companies going global. So excited to be here. Thank you for this opportunity, Jamie. Looking forward to the conversation.
Perfect. My name's Rob Luini. I've been with Export Development Canada for the last 12 years. Previous to that, I was with HSBC Bank for numerous years. So exporting is at the core of what I do and like to do. I specialize with companies between $10 to $300 million in annual revenues. But that does not mean that EDC does that. We have all the way from startups to large multinationals, and we're here to help the Canadian companies go grow and export. So I'm just going to share a little bit of a deck here in terms of who we are and what we do. I am not going to get into the nitty gritty of each one of the products, what they are and what they do, but I did, as part of the deck, include them as the attachments. Samir, can you just let me know if you can see the deck with a thumbs up?
Can, all good.
Perfect. So who is Export Development Canada and what do we do? We are Canada's export trade agency. It's our job to go through and help Canadian companies take on the world and help mitigate the risk. We were started after World War II to help stimulate the economy again. We were born from accounts receivable insurance. And then over time, we've grown to be one of the best export credit agencies globally. We have the ability to guarantee banks. We have the ability to direct lend. We've got a large corporate and project financing team, and a huge ability to go through and help with knowledge and connections globally. That's kind of where I would like to start with all of this. Is I like to talk about sort of the exporter's journey. A Canadian company will go through, they'll get a market viable product set up, They'll start selling within Canada to make sure that it works. And then to really start to scale, that's when they start thinking about, I need to start looking outside of Canada. Now, the US used to be a great first starting point, but now we need to start looking at the world. And it's, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? How am I going to get there? And how do I figure some of this out? And EDC has a large ability to go through and help with some of that initial triaging and knowledge. We have a online web portal that allows you to go through and say, I would like to start exporting to the UK. What do I need to know? What does this look like? How do I protect my IP? And we've created a database of all of our web services or our knowledge services into one spot for you guys to be able to log in and help build on that journey. We're also able to go through and help get you connected to the Trade Commissioner services so that you've got a person here and on the foreign market that you're looking at, as well as getting us introduced to our our global business development people in foreign markets. So it's curated content. We've got webinars. We've got online insights. We've got market reports. All of that is free for you guys to go through. Once you guys sort of know where you would like to go and where you guys are going to start developing contracts, our next sort of program would be to be able to go through and work with helping to get those insured to make sure that you guys are going to get paid at the end of the day. With our online portal, you guys would be able to go through, request information on the buyer, and we would say yes or no in terms of us being able to insure that contract up to 90%. And then that would be assignable to the bank for increased working capital. From there, you know where you want to go. You've got your contracts in place. This is where we really step up as well in terms of making sure that you've got the working capital you need to be able to execute on those contracts. So it's being able to go through and guarantee the bank to make sure that you've got the working capital either through an operating line, or maybe you need to buy new equipment to scale up. We can help them put additional belts and suspenders around the security package through our guarantee programs to help get those that working capital support for you. So we're kind of from the starting of exporting to continuing to find new markets through our knowledge, our risk mitigation, and our financing options. I'll get into some of our more core products a little bit later. What I want to talk about too is our mandate. So everyone thinks about EDC in terms of we only do the large guys, and it has to be something in terms of a Canadian widget that's crossing a border. Yes, we do a lot of large, but we also do a lot of startups and early stage exporters, and our big focus is on really growing the mid-market. But there's a couple of different ways to be able to go through and look at this. Yes, a widget crossing a border is the easiest way to go through and do that. And if at least 15% of your total revenue comes from a good or a service, so you've got a contract with a foreign counterparty, those services are being done here, but it's benefiting somebody else outside of Canada, we're able to qualify you as a direct exporter. Now, what a lot of people don't know that we can do is our indirect mandate, or more of a supply chain play. Samir's favorite topic, and I love saying it, is a bean exporter. So if you've got a Canadian company who sells cans of beans to another foreign company, but you are the person who makes the cans and sells it to the bean exporter, well, without that can, those beans aren't going anywhere, or it'll be very messy in terms of how they get over there. So we are able to go through and say, because this can exporter needs the cans, they are indirectly helping to support a direct exporter. And long as 15% of that total revenue is coming from there, we're able to help support them as well. The next one is our future export mandate. So when a customer goes through and they're exporting for the first time and they don't have that 15%, or they are actively trying to build on contracts and need a little extra support, if they think that they're going to have at least 15% of their sales in the next 3 years be from a foreign counterparty for at least 15%, we can come in and help with our guarantee products with that as well. So I just want to make sure that you guys hear that, like, yes, we can go through and we do focus on goods and services directly tying across the border, but it's much broader than that. And if you're supporting somebody else to export, or if you're just starting within that journey, we can help you out as well. So in terms of our core products, this is some of the stuff that I talked about before. So our accounts receivable program, we basically become a part of your AR team. So we're vetting all of your AR. We're making sure that it's strong and receivable and that we're willing to insure it. We're able to assign it to the banks. This is from bankruptcy. This is from refusal to pay, breach of contract. So we're able to do quite a bit with this. Our export guarantee program, or the trade expansion lending program, is our bank guarantee product. So this is where we can go through and help give your bank a 75% guarantee, or in times of where assets or M&A is outside of Canada, we can go up to 100% and help remove that jurisdictional risk from the bank and allow them to treat the world like it's here in Canada. Samir's favorite is the Accounts Performance Security Guarantee Program. So this is to be used with standby letters of credit. They're fancy drafts. So if your counterparty that's holding it calls it, it needs to be paid. So the banks have to issue 100% security for it, usually by cash, or they'll take margin out of the operating line. We guarantee the bank 100%. So it's our ability to go through and we're AAA rated. They treat us like cash, and it gives you that operating cash back into your company to continue to grow. It started off with like bid bonds and performance bonds, but it's migrated into various different uses, such as supplier bonds and getting extended payment terms. We've just added, as part of our trade insurance program, the ability to look at some of your customs bonds. So anywhere there's kind of cash tied up as a just in case, rent bonds would be another great example. We might be able to look to get that cash back into your operating. Same with the foreign exchange guarantees. We're seeing a lot of people going through and trying to lock in the FX rates right now, and banks are asking for security. We can give them 100% guarantee with that as well. So Samir and I are part of the Southern Alberta team. We've got our other contacts here as well, but by all means, call us, any one of us. We work in team contacts or team targets. And if it's not us, we're able to go through and get you connected to the right person. So say it's in BC or Saskatchewan, we'll be able to go through and help bring in the right people. And that is our high level. So thank you for allowing us to share that.
Excellent. Thank you for that. All right. So as mentioned, if you have questions, include them in the chat, and I'll be sure to talk to Rob and Samir about any of the questions that you have. Why don't we jump right in? So obviously, Canadian businesses face different types of challenges as they're navigating the international market. So let's start there. What are some of the challenges that you see with your clients and with Canadian businesses?
I'll kick this one off if you don't mind, Rob. So I think the biggest challenge when a Canadian company enters a new market is making sure that they know who their counterparty is, making sure that they'll get paid. So the question is, yes, maybe the name that you're looking at, maybe their financials are available, but what if the financials are not available online and you cannot make a thorough decision in terms of will they be able to pay? And secondly, when you get that done, so let's say you believe that they have the ability to pay, do you know if they have the willingness to pay? Do you know other companies that have exported to them and how have they treated their counterparts? How can you make sure that you're going to be paid on time? So these are the biggest challenges that I see, and the biggest conversations right now that I'm having with some of my clients. And not to go back to the products that Rob mentioned, but I think the insuring those receivables, but also going through the typical bank products such as documentary letters of credit, it makes sense in terms of trying to protect the business.
And certainly what we see when businesses are growing, even if they're growing within Canada, there's a different way that vendors and counterparties pay when you enter a new community. That's true even like from Calgary to Edmonton at times, right? And so that's going to be even more so when you're switching countries. So I think that that's a really good point to think about, the willingness and the ability to pay, and looking at it with a bit more scrutiny than maybe you would someone that you've heard of and you have friends that have worked with here in your local community. It's just a bit more diligence has to be put, and maybe that insurance is that much more applicable. I think the other thing to think about is that obviously one of the hesitations our clients and anybody has with AR insurance is, you know, that they don't want someone else taking over their relationships or harming the relationships. But when we're talking about this level of counterparty and cross-border counterparties, their perception of insurance and that additional relationship might be different. It might not be the same risk that it is when you're having an AR insurance for your neighbor down the street, right? So any thoughts on that?
Well, on that front, I can say that we don't take the relationship over. We try to find information. We get access to a number of resources. So we try to find information of other financial standings, of other kinds of information, not finance related, online and through those sources that I mentioned. So we don't take the relationship over from the company. They continue working how they do, but they know that in the background they're protected. So that gives additional comfort level, and it also gives an advantage because they know that they're protected, so they can negotiate better terms, more competitive terms. Because at the end of the day, when you're entering a new market with a good that could be easily sourced from another country, for example, what are the biggest advantages that the company can offer? Yes, quality. The Canadian companies here have a lot of good quality products, but also its pricing and terms of payment. So if you're able to extend the payment terms to a new buyer in a new foreign jurisdiction because you know you're protected by EDC, for example, then that pro- provides additional um, competitive advantage to the companies. So we're not taking over the relationship at all. We're there to support in the background and kind of enhance the capabilities of a company to negotiate different terms.
I'm just going to add on to that as well. Like, just in terms of, like, say we're not able to get the information that we need to get to the credit limit, one of the first things that we'll do is go back to you guys and say, how would you like to do this? Do you want to source the financial statements yourself, or do you mind if we reach out directly? We'll have to notify them that we're doing this on behalf of you, but how do you want to maintain your relationships? Even in a claim scenario where like it's overdue and we're working to help with you with collecting it. I remember incidents where our claims team was just like, so are we looking to do repeat business with them, or are we done with this? Because we can word the letter very nicely or very meanly, but part of this is going to be with you in terms of understanding what this is and what this relationship means to you. So we don't take that away. I'm going to step back to you in terms of outside of the accounts receivable insurance and going into entering new markets. Like, it's scary. Like, you don't know what you don't know going into some of these types of things, and language barriers and cultural barriers, and how does our legal system and regulatory work, like all of that are things that you need to be thinking about and uh, uh, um, adding into how you guys go through and do business there. But that's EDC again has the ability to go through and help you with some of those. I remember talking to a couple of my clients where they're like, "Oh, we just had some like great meetings from this trade mission with this company in Mexico, and they wanted to do all of this business with them. So we've been emailing them, and then emailing them, and then emailing them, but I've heard nothing. Like, I thought this went great. Like, I thought this was a done deal." I'm like, have you told them that you're coming or you want to pick up the phone and have a conversation with them? No, let me try that. And then they call back. They're like, oh yeah, they picked up the phone right away. Or like the fact that it was going to be a face-to-face meeting completely changed everything. So it's really about trying to go through and find those people and companies like ourselves or other people within your contacts and supply chain that have done business there and say, what other things do we need to be thinking about? Because business elsewhere isn't always done like business here.
Yeah, and I
The
think
good
it's great to have a partner like EDC where they've seen many examples of that, even just with the little things like what is included in that email and whether or not there's an opportunity for a phone call or in person. That's a small thing, but it makes a huge difference because if you're just getting ghosted with your emails and you don't know the cultural norms, that can make a massive difference to your business. So I love that story. Is there other examples of how EDC navigates the challenges? So we talked a bit about the products high level, Rob. Maybe there's some more specifics. Samir, we talked a bit about the receivables and how obviously that insurance can give you the confidence and the competitive terms and conditions. And I love especially the part of the story, Samir, where sometimes AR insurance is looked at as an afterthought, like I need to fix my working capital, I need to mitigate a risk that I'm seeing happening to me. But the story that you gave and the example you gave is actually doing it proactively prior to terms and conditions, prior to contracts, to some degree prior to entering the market. And I think that mindset change is so critical for the CFOs and the business owners that are listening to us today, that sometimes mitigating risk can actually open your ability to take on risk. And how competitive is that, especially in a market where people are scared like they are right now? So what are some other examples that EDC helps navigate international markets or stories?
I think from that perspective, the most important one is also what companies don't know what they don't know. So helping them find the right questions and then finding the answers to those questions is quite important as well. So, for example, last year I was talking to a business and they were thinking about starting selling their product in the foreign market. And they have asked us, what are the labeling requirements for our product in that foreign market? And we started doing that analysis. Even, for example, when some companies from, like I'm from Azerbaijan, and I know a couple of companies reached out to me. I want to sell my product. We're selling it to the US. I want to come to Canada. And I was telling them that that the labeling requirements in Canada are different than the US because we have two languages here instead of the one in America, for example. So these type of things really make sense. The other things is also, for example, in some cultures, different colors mean different things. So when you're branding or you're making a product, are you adapting to that culture? Are you adapting your branding and your messaging to where you're entering? Um, Also, another typical question like visa requirements. We're looking at a customer actually right now where they're going on a temporary project in a different country, and they were asking, okay, what are the temporary visa requirements for our client or for our workers in that foreign country? So again, knowledge is also another part that is very underrated. Engaging our platform and our colleagues is free. So you sign up to our knowledge hub. Robel's already mentioned about that. There's a lot of questions that have been answered, and we publish those questions. But you also have the opportunity to ask additional questions if you didn't find the answer there. The nuance is we're not going to be preparing a business plan for the company. However, getting those targeted questions and helping out, that is something within our capabilities.
I like to say that
Yeah,
we're a concierge, not a consultant on some of these types of things. But
yeah, but sometimes it's just a matter of even like looking at the questions that you didn't think to ask. So I imagine that that resource would be a great place to start your thinking process, even in the early days. So I'm excited that you've got the link in the deck, which we'll share to everybody after this session. That's awesome. Is there anything else, Rob, that you wanted to note about navigating international markets before we move to our next topic?
I think one of the clients I'm working with right now is going through and their business had been focused on the US. And with everything that's going on right now, they're like, we need to start diversifying. We need to start thinking of different things as well. They had gone through, they had done a bunch of market research, they had done some trade missions with the Alberta government to find a new market. They thought they found one. And they're like, this is going to be great. The TAM here is huge. We think that it's a great market viable product. Away we go. And I was just like, okay, let's go through and get you introduced to our global business development team in the market. And they called the trade commissioner, and we went through and we found out quite quickly, they're like, oh, even though that it's a great market for it, there's 4 major companies that buy it, and it takes 2 years to get on their list. So even though they went through to go through and say this looks amazing in theory, they got to start now for 2 years from now. But if they need to have something feeding into their pipeline a little bit sooner to start hitting those things, they needed to start thinking of other markets as well. So it's really about leveraging the ecosystem and the community as a whole.
Excellent. And so obviously EDC clients, I imagine you're supporting the US diversification more than any other country, but what are some of the top countries besides the US that you see a lot of opportunity and activity in?
It really depends on per industry. So there is a lot in terms of certain markets and certain geographics want certain things from Canada. I will say, as a whole, EDC has a huge bet on the Indo-Pacific region, just with the amount of people and the diversifying needs and tastes of the area. We are spending a lot of time and energy within that geographic area to see what we can do to help start building up some of those supply chains and knowledge to really bring Canadian content and knowledge to that area. Samir, is there anything else?
No, I have nothing else to add on that front. I'm just going to say that also when companies are choosing a new market, I think the most important thing to know is I'm saying most important quite a bit now, so everything is important when you're doing international trade. But one thing I believe is logistics. People forget about the transportation side of things. Of course, transporting from Canada to the US is easy. You kind of load the truck and it just drive. The driver just takes it to the destination. Whereas when it comes to international exports, or more international, when you're actually going on a ship or you're flying your goods, there are a lot of other questions that's starting to arise. For example, what Incoterm are you choosing? Or which port are you going? How are you insuring your goods there? And that is a question that has many other questions within it. So it's also very important to consider not just one route, but maybe having alternative routes as well. The other thing is also seeing which countries we have trade agreements with. Because of a lot of our trade has been going to America, we have underutilized, for example, some of the trade agreements that we have with the European Union. What are there available right now? What can we leverage in those terms? So there's a lot of things that have been done by Canada in general that we just have to find ways of utilizing it better and using it for our benefits or for the company's benefits to make it easier to get into those journeys of entering those new markets.
I love that. Those are excellent considerations. So let's talk a bit about diversification in trade. Why do you think it's important that a business looks at trade diversification? So, for example, if we're talking to a business owner or a CFO of an organization that's doing awesome here in Canada and has tons of more opportunities to grow, they haven't tapped out their local market or Western Canada or Canada as a full company or country, sorry. What would make them start having to worry about ports and trade agreements and all these complications? I mean, the first thing they're going to think is that sounds scary and I could still grow here. So what's the case to make it worth it that they should think about this in addition to their local or Canadian growth?
If I had a crystal ball, I would be on a beach someplace sipping Mai Tais and not working because I would have won the lottery already. by knowing the numbers. We don't know what the future holds is, I think, the big thing. And watching what's going on with some of the global impacts right now, you just don't know what's going to happen and how it's going to affect your business. So by going through and looking at other opportunities to fill your bucket with, in that way, if something happens, it's almost like insurance. If something were to go through and your clients were no longer to do anything, a policy was put in place and it changed the ability to do something, you've got other markets and other revenue streams that are in your ability to control to help you pivot in whatever's going to be coming in the future. So it may seem scary in terms of being able to start thinking about some of those types of things. But if you start doing iterative processes now, while you still have the ability to grow in Canada, it gives you the ability to then start sooner than when something tragic happens and you have to completely learn everything at once while everybody else is trying to do it too. So not only are you trying to have your steep learning curve, you now have a competitive curve with it as well. So by going through, starting early, starting to figure out where you want to go, and starting to look at some of those things, it just helps to build those additional revenue streams to make you the bigger, best company that you can be.
Excellent. And I think it's interesting that you point that out. Sometimes we look for a new opportunity when we actually need new opportunity. But if you start looking at new opportunity when you're not dependent on the timeline of that coming to fruition, or frankly, it coming to fruition at all, then that's an opportunity, not to be cheesy, but to amplify, right? You're in a good, solid foundation, doing what you've proven to be good at within the market, that you've proven to have a brand, and now you're looking outside of it when it's not consequential for how long it's going to take or how successful you are, so that you just have that much more growth and next steps and next steps. So I love that, because oftentimes we look for new opportunities when something else, the door closes, or we're seeing the runway ending. And a great business that's truly focused on growth is going to do it far more proactively. So that's great, great points, Rob. Samir, anything further to add on the importance of diversification and some of the strategies that businesses can use to do it?
I think like one of the biggest things in terms of when you're entering a new market, you are faced with other companies from other countries. So it helps the company here become more competitive by becoming better experts in what they do, because they're working on perfecting their product. They're working on making the processes leaner, let's say. So getting into those new markets internationally will also help them have a better product domestically as well, and a better, stronger company. So I think that's also one of the things. And of course, you don't want to put all your eggs in the same basket. So that's kind of to Rob's point too. Have different markets. When one egg breaks, you have other eggs to fall on and go deeper in.
Oh yeah, I heard so.
Sorry, when you think about the mandate that EDC has, that's a great point, Samir, is that by being competitive internationally, you're actually serving your own clients and customers and Canadians that much better, which, kind of for those of us that are like, explain to me again why EDC is paid for by the government or whatever, those questions are running through people's heads every once in a while. That's the reason in a nutshell in so many ways, right? Is that if we have good employers that are providing good products and services and being challenged and leveling up because of their international experience, we all win when we buy that product or we buy that service. So that's awesome point to be made. Sorry, I interrupted you, Rob. Go ahead.
No, I was just further on to that. Like those who do international business have way higher R&D and shred claims in terms of that growing and that iterative, to Samir's point of not only if you're going international, you're going to be having the best global product. I also wanted to just kind of add, going international and those types of things is always going to take longer than you think it does. So starting early was an important part.
Yeah, being proactive is something that I think is a theme of what I'm hearing today for sure. So, EDC supports businesses in their efforts. We've talked about a few different ways that they help. Let's talk a bit more about that. And I'd also like to hear you guys' thoughts on just size of market, because I think at the FEI event, Jason Kenney made a comment. I think it was something along the lines of Canada's full market is equivalent of like Alabama or something like that. And I don't know exactly what KPIs he was referring to, but I also heard that on a podcast that Jesse sent me about a month ago too. So Alabama is not even like a super productive state or super populous state. So I think that the point is clear. Whether the math and facts are exactly accurate, I don't know. But I think it's something we should talk about. I mean, we know the populations of the US, of China, of so many countries are just crazy compared to what we're used to, right? Like, how many people do we meet, maybe you, Samir, when we first met, that think of Calgary as a small town? And I'm from Moose Jaw, so I think of this as a very booming city. So let's talk a bit about that opportunity and how EDC can help, you know, figure out that numbers means power, right? And if you're hitting a market that has that many more buyers, that's pretty exciting stuff, right?
Well, for sure, like when you're entering those new markets that have the amounts of people that are going to buy your product, that sounds amazing. But at the same time, there should be caution applied to that as well. Because, for example, if you're in a manufacturing business and all of a sudden, like people want to get those sexy contracts, right, with Walmart, with Costco to hit those huge numbers. But are you able to sustain those numbers? Do you have enough manufacturing capabilities to sustain those numbers? If you don't, so let's say you get that Costco contract and you don't have that manufacturing capability, well, EDC can help you out in terms of finding ways to maybe get source of capital to enhance your manufacturing capabilities so you can produce more and thus sell more internationally. So that is one thing to consider. But also, I believe that, like for example, our bet that Rod mentioned about for going into those Indo-Pacific markets, I think it's great. Those markets are underpenetrated by a lot of the international players. It's a growing mid-market segment there, so there should be more demand, and companies will be able to generate good revenue. So I think it's a name of the numbers are important, but one should be looking at them with cautious because like, do you have the capability to manufacture? Do you have working capital capabilities? I like to compare working capital to a blood of a human body, right? Like you may have all your organs in perfect condition, but if the blood is not going correctly, there are going to be some trouble. So the same here, like you have your capabilities, you have your people and everything, but you don't have enough working capital. Are you able to perform on those large big contracts? And will you run into issues if you are unable to perform? So these type of things definitely need to be considered. Rob, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with that in terms of I've talked to a number of clients that they go through and they're like, we're going to go through and we're gangbusters in terms of all of this. And I was just like, okay, but talk to me about your ability to execute on this, because there's a number of times that they go through, they start, it fumbles because they've taken on too much and promised too much. And then they burnt the bridge with all of their key buyers. So you really need to make sure that you're going through, you're targeting it in an area that you're able to do it and scale correctly. One of the other things I thought was interesting is I had a client that said, "Oh, the TAM in this one state is amazing. It's so great. Like the volume here is amazing." And then they went through and did a lot more market research on it and realized that the way that the buyers buy there is actually it's more of a one like a turnkey method. So instead of selling your one widget into all of them, you actually have to find a distributor to go through to consolidate in all of it, and then it goes in as one package. So the market that they thought was going to be brilliant based on the numbers wasn't nearly as brilliant, and the one that they weren't even thinking about made more sense from them because they were able to sell at higher volumes and higher abilities directly and control those relationships.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, like how the middlemen, and whether it's a broker or whatever the term is for the industry that you're in, certain communities are going to have middlemen that control the whole market, and then others it's just direct and you have relationships with the end user and buyers. So it's little things like that that make a big difference, and I love these stories that you guys are adding and reminding us to think about. So we've talked a lot about manufacturing examples, but I know that services is something that you noted at the beginning, Rob, and I just want to address some questions that our members have on that. So for example, when you're looking at an IT business, for example, what kind of support is there for Canadian businesses that are trying to go into these markets, not with manufacturing or inventory or product, but with services?
Yeah, let me maybe lead on that one first. It's for us, it's about the contract. So a lot of the development in terms of going through and finding a new market and selling to somebody, whether it's a manufactured widget or whether it's you're going to go through and do the engineering, or you're selling software as a service. That upfront part of like trying to understand the due diligence of who are they, where are they, what's it look like, and the legal registrations would be very important. You're going to be nuanced a little bit in terms of a tech company, in terms of what does the IP look like, and what are some of the additional rules around storing data and those types of things. So you'll need to make sure that you're working with the trade commissioners in all of those markets or ourselves to go through and truly understand that. But in terms of then going through and how EDC could help, we're still able to look at ensuring your MRR with your engineering contracts. If you have to post bid bonds and performance bonds on some of the upfront engineering, we can help with all of those types of things. So knowledge to me is the product that is then being cross-bordered. So we can help with both the widget and the knowledge, and setting up your international operations is going to be very similar one way to the next. It's just then going to be, how does your contract work? You don't have to worry about the timelines as much with delivery and stuff when it's a turnkey SaaS and you're just giving them a license.
Right. May have to be spending more time on where you're going to hire that knowledge worker, I guess, and whether or not they're going to be local at some point or stay here, and all those questions, right? So how much, you mentioned trade agreements a couple of times. So what changes when there's not a trade agreement versus when there is? And like, what's the role that trade agreements have, and how does EDC help the clients and work within the trade agreements?
Well, the biggest role of a trade agreement is how does the country help its companies to start entering other countries' markets. So the goal is, let's say you're negotiating an agreement, you're saying, okay, I'm going to bring some of my goods there, and you're going to bring some of your goods here, and we're going to compensate that. So different agreements have different forms, different like even the EU, it all started as a common market, right? So that was also a trade agreement that the EU originally came up with. So there could be different forms of this, but what we could do is help out trying to understand, if you're entering that particular market, what is available right now? Have we signed anything? And what does it look like? And which products or services does it encompass as well?
I'd also add the rules. The terms and conditions are laid out. It's usually set for a set period of time. And it helps in terms of giving additional comfort in terms of being able to set up your contracts and your terms and conditions and who's going to pay for what, because you know that maybe there is certain things within it and how it's going to operate. Versus if there's a country that doesn't have one, those can change a lot faster than those where we've got an agreement.
So it almost acts as a starting checklist, which can provide some comfort and some action points. So that's good to think about, versus if you don't have a trade agreement, you're going to have to navigate it with a bit more research and uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. What's the political climate there? Is it looking at changing? Is there things within the platforms of those that are coming in that would change how you do business there, which then could change your sales techniques, and taking a good contract that was quite profitable with good margins to something that maybe, and all other things now make it no longer as profitable as it once was.
Yeah, that's those are good points for sure. So, how can a business stay informed about potential markets for diversification? And how does EDC help? I mean, it can be pretty expensive to do market research. You gave a few great examples of people who did initial market research and then in the second phase discovered the middleman or discovered other factors that changed their perception on where they should go next. That all took somebody either time or money to get done. How does EDC assist, or do they? And how would you recommend that clients get started if market research is sort of the first thing and the next thing they're supposed to be doing?
I would say that the best thing is to start using free resources. So, like things like ITC Trade Map, for example, will show which country imports, like the statistics of which products they import. So let's say if a country imports an X product and you're a manufacturer of those products, and you can see, okay, there could be potential there. Google Trends or similar web also shows interest for your types of product. So those kind of things are available online. But then EDC, I view EDC as being part of the trade ecosystem, because we have supports that are provided at the federal level by the Trade Commission, the TCS. Then we have the Albertan government as well. They have their trade team that provides additional help. And utilizing those resources as well, and then in conjunction with our knowledge hub, you're building together the whole picture. So it's like when you're putting together a puzzle, you have different pieces and you're utilizing different expertise and different resources, trying to build them all together. And then you can do it as much as you can on a free basis. And then, but there might come a time when you actually have to pay for some additional services. But it's one thing when you're paying for some additional services, and another thing when you're paying for someone else to do everything for you from scratch, right? So understand what resources are available. The TCS is great. Albertan Trade Team is great for companies located in Alberta. Their grants go to trade missions, understand markets better through trade missions and all that. So like I said, use those statistics websites as well.
I
Rob,
love
anything to add?
Copilot. I love Copilot and ChatGPT. I still advocate human in the loop, go through, review it. But like Samir said, like it's trying to narrow down that funnel of like, where are a couple of key markets, and then invest in those as you go. One of the things Samir talked about was like the trade missions and being able to go and see the markets, visit them, and get introduced to other buyers. There's a couple of things that the Trade Commissioner Services and the Alberta government put out there. So if you guys haven't heard of the CAN Export Program, it is open now, but it helps in terms of being able to supplement the costs of travel, translations into different languages, getting proper verifications and certificates to be able to sell. So it's something that you go through, apply with on the Trade Commissioner Services website to help get some of that additional cost paid for. And then the Alberta government loved it so much that they put one out right after. It's a little bit smaller, but between the two, CAN Export and the Alberta Export Expansion Program, there's free money out there to help do some of these types of things.
And if I'm not mistaken, they're stackable as well.
They are, yep.
Those are great resources for people to look at, because obviously between the cost and the time, it is difficult. So any assistance and help makes a big difference. I'm glad you brought up AI, Rob, and I think it's interesting because when it comes to the market research, certainly it's a great starting point. The human component matters. I wouldn't suggest that you spend $1 million investing in a market purely based on ChatGPT market research. But chances are it can get you rolling, started, and then when you validate it, hopefully most of what you started with turns out to be validated and accurate and has good sources, right? So a great place to start. And another thing when it comes to AI to think about is, again, at a starting point, you got to go further when it comes to diligence and making big decisions and investments. But even those trade agreements, I mean, the most of us that are sitting here on this webinar are not going to be experts at reading trade agreements, nor are we going to have any super passion about reading a trade agreement. And that's something that AI does a great job of, right? You can throw in the trade agreement and the link or what have you into AI, ask them to summarize some key points and risks. If you're good at prompting, you can get more specific and start that for your first thoughts. Again, don't rely on it exclusively because it might miss the most important risk because AI doesn't know your business as good as you, but it can really get you started in terms of the key factors and the key things to look at and the key components of the agreement. And for those of us that aren't used to reading government or legal language, that's a really good starting point to get our mind in the gears that it needs to be in. Anything else on diversification and trade before we move to our next topic?
Just there's a question on stackable. So stackable is when you have two different grants and you can utilize those two grants at the same time. So one does not exclude the other. That's what I wanted to note. I saw that there was a question there. So before we go jump, I just wanted to close the loop on that question.
Perfect. So stackables is when you're using more than one grant. So for example, the trade commissions, which is the federal program, right? And then the Alberta is the provincial program. And
yeah,
certainly just even navigating the different government organizations can be something that people need to start and learn, right? And thankfully they're going to be that much further ahead understanding EDC better with you guys today, but there are a few different players in the market and it can be confusing when you're brand new to it. So I appreciate that we're helping people look at what they should consider. Anything else on trade diversification?
One thing to note, because we talked about trade agreements, I think we should talk about the contracts themselves between a Canadian exporter and the company that is buying their goods. Because one thing is like when you're selling internally, the contracts can be quite brief. But when you're selling goods in a new market, you have to really go to the details of the contract. For example, let's say in the case of litigation, which court will be the main court for the litigation processes? Quite an important product nuance. Another question that is comes up from time to time: what are your Incoterms? Who is in charge of what? Because if you say, hey, I'm going to be handling the delivery to your port, but okay, you handle the delivery. Who is doing the customs, for example? You have to really go into the Incoterms, put the right Incoterm that makes sense, so that there's no ifs and buts of for these conversations. How are you getting paid? What are the terms of payment? There was an instance with a company. They came to us and they said, hey, we're receiving 20% in advance, 60% upon shipment or prior to shipment, and then the rest is coming when it's actually delivered. So yeah, 80% of the money seems like it's going to be provided to our client prior to them releasing the good. However, when we read the details of the contract, it had provisions there that to receive that second 60% payment, they had to provide documents which showed that it's on board, it's en route. They don't have possession anymore of the machinery that they were sending. So in essence, they only got 20% in advance, and the rest was upon different contingencies. So the nuances in the contract are much more important when it comes to international trade, that people have to really dig into it. And not all lawyers can give suggestions, because sometimes they look at, okay, the language is perfect, but you have to have trade lawyers to help out navigate some of those nuances that come with contract signings.
And so
Contracts are like fences. You need the better the contract and the better the fence, the greater the relationship.
I love that. So when Rob, you would suggest, as Samir mentioned, a lawyer that specializes in trade as opposed to a lawyer that specializes in a specific country, or like how do you go about finding the right lawyer?
I would say finding the right lawyer would be asking them the right question. Do they have experience in dealing with, first of all, international trades? and exports. If they haven't had that experience, it's the same as, you wouldn't hire a corporate lawyer through a divorce procedure, right? So a similar idea. Try to find a person who has had that experience, and it's good if they haven't had experience within a certain market that adds value to them. But in general, having experience with one country will help them navigating through signing a contract with another country. But also one thing I also forgot that is also important is contract frustration. Typically, not a lot of contracts have good clauses for contract cancellation. So you want to make sure that you have strong clauses because, again, if you're building some machinery and um, it takes time, it takes money to build it, and all of a sudden the contract is canceled, are you easily going to sell it to someone else? And what will happen to those expenses that you already incurred? So that's another clause that to be mindful of.
Good point. And sometimes receipt of payment and the terms and conditions about canceling, like it, you don't want to assume that they go hand in hand. They don't always, right? When you get paid versus when you have the opportunity to cancel aren't necessarily aligned, nor should they be. And to your earlier point, you might want to be generous on your collections in order to win the contract, but you shouldn't allow that same generosity to in turn be perceived as when you can cancel a contract because
Yeah,
that's not going to work. So
exactly.
that's a great example. Sometimes we assume that logically things are aligned, but they're not, and they don't have to be, and nor should they be to your own benefit and your own risk reduction. So when we've talked a lot about some success stories and some case studies, I want to make sure that we get some more of those in. A few people might drop off at 1, but we're going to stay, everybody, and talk at least for another 15 minutes, maybe even till 1:30. So please do stay on if this is of importance to you, and we hope that many of you do. So case studies and success stories. Can you share a few more where Canadian companies have had the opportunity to work internationally with EDC support? Like one of those ones that you were just so excited and proud of. I'd love to hear some of those stories from each of you.
Rob, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones I'm working with right now is a coffee company, and they go through and help to take some of the Canadian roasters. And although the beans would have originally come in from someplace else, they've come through, they've given some value add. And originally we're looking at just selling them here in Canada. And then this coffee company went through and realized how in demand some of the Canadian coffee companies and how they roast them were internationally, and came to EDC, and we've started working with them in terms of finding new markets, protecting them against some of their buyers. They're looking at setting up shop and having inventory in other countries so it's close to their buyers, so that way when they order, it doesn't take 3 weeks on a boat to get over someplace. It's already there and can be delivered next day type thing. So definitely this being able to go through and work with this company and help give them ideas and suggestions about um, um, how do their clients want to engage with them, and how do we help support them to meet that so that it's a great user experience for both the companies and the foreign buyers.
That's awesome. And I'm sure that when they start to realize the appreciation that those foreign buyers have for the way they roast coffee and the way that their product differentiates, that's an incredible opportunity for those business leaders and for that business. That's excellent. Samir, do you have a case study or success story you'd like to share?
I'd like to share a story that it's still in progress. We're still talking to this client, that we're still working with them. But I think the interesting thing about this particular one is that when entering a new market, they were not entering through their traditional capabilities. So this is an oil and gas services company, and when they entered the new market that they're looking into, they're entering the country through airspace markets. So they were able to go put in additional R&D. They have strong engineers. They have a good base for doing more research and developing their product. And now they're able to start negotiating entering the airspace market in Australia. which is neat because people haven't considered that before, that that you can really adapt the technology, and it also shows that you don't have to be reliant on one particular industry. You can put in additional efforts, additional R&D money, and start working at and entering a new market through different industries.
So then you're getting more than one diversification with that move,
Exactly.
which is going to mitigate your risk and open that much more opportunity. So Rob, when Samir brings something like that to the table, and then you and EDC are measuring whether this ends up successful, what are the things that you look at? How do you measure success within your team?
Were we able, I mean, like, to me, it comes down to the root of what we're built for. Our job at the root of it is to try and help bring more foreign money into Canada. So I look at it from were we able to go through and help facilitate that? Or if we helped a company get closer to that. So success for me is being able to go through and help them close on a contract and execute it easily to continue to repeat it. And then B, to be able to go through and feel more comfortable getting closer and closer to that first contract.
Excellent. One of the things you brought up in the original slides, and I know that you guys have presented to Amplify before, and it always resonated with me, is how sometimes we as a business don't see ourselves as an exporter because of where we land on the supply chain, or also the possibility of us exporting in the future, but not maybe at that point yet. Can we talk a bit about where you've seen some success where then initially the client barely even thought they qualified or should be talking to you? I mean, I imagine you guys got such great business affiliates in the market that I'm sure there's times that the big five bank or what have you are the ones that light up the client's eyes and make them realize, hey, EDC could support us. We could get you more funds. You do qualify, even though you don't think you qualify. Is there any success stories about that where people didn't even understand why you were on the phone call because they didn't even identify as an exporter, and next thing you know, they're getting growth and help from you?
I love when I go through and I talk to a client and I'm like, so are you guys exporting? They're like, no. Like, what are the sales in the US? Oh, 60%. I'm like, okay, so you are an exporter. So it's one of those things. For us, it's a mind, like, as Canadians, I think there's a mind shift with a lot of this as well. Like, we are so international and so multicultural and a lot of the stuff that we do, unless we're crossing the ocean, we don't always think of it as exporting or being part of that. But to your point in terms of like where they go through and they thought it was like needed to be a widget that crossed a border in terms of that, like we've been able to go through and kind of look at like export platforms and those types of things. So like our auto industry, we know that it's going to cross the border multiple times and those types of things. So anything that comes in that's auto is automatically deemed as an export mandate. So if they needed help to be able to go through and build a new tool, but they weren't going to get paid until it was approved by the OEMs, we've got a tooling facility that allows them to go through and help get insurance on those products. So a lot of the times they wouldn't think about being part of the supply chain or exporting because all of their sales are going to the factory in Ontario. But because of what it means to Canada as a whole, we've been able to go through and support it. Same with in Alberta, oil and gas. So there's going to come a point where the how far removed from the drill head is going to be too far removed. But if you are in that supply chain that's going through, that's helping the E&Ps to get the oil on the pipeline to get it out of the country, you're an exporter. You're helping as part of all of this it's part of some of the fractional stuff. So when we've gone into some of these banker meetings and it's the owner of an oil and gas services company that's like, all of my work is in Fort Mac. Like, why are you here? It's because it's in the broader picture of what does your support mean to the Canadian ecosystem and economy as a whole.
Interesting. So there's a couple industries like auto or oil and gas that, you know, by default, you're probably an exporter. I mean, it's not black and white or absolute, but there's a really good chance you're going to be considered an exporter because of the supply chain and the way that the industry works. Auto, oil and gas, you said. Is there any others that come to mind? Like, how about agriculture? How does that work? It seems like most agriculture product would eventually cross the border or have a good chance. You're not going to know which grain stays and which one leaves, right?
Yeah, no, a lot of that will tie into kind of like broader numbers in and around that. EDC kind of focuses a little bit more on more on projects. So like, say that there is the I'm trying to think of one in ag, but I'm just going to go to the oil and gas because I know it better. Some of like the pipelines that were being built. We know that without that pipeline, that it wasn't going to be able to go through and be done. So we blessed that pipeline as a export program, and any of the bonding needs or supply chain that went into that direct pipeline qualified as export support under contracts. There came one point where there was a bridge between, I think it was Detroit and why am I forgetting the W? Anyway, they'll kill me later, but there was a bridge that was going to go through and help increase the amount of trade being done between Ontario and the U.S. So we deemed that bridge as a export project, and any of the support that went into that would be deemed export. So we look at it for more of a project versus industry, except for auto. Auto for sure is full industry. But if you guys are selling into something that would then be deemed an export project, we could look to help in terms of that as well.
And
Any other stories or comments on this, Samir?
yep, I think sometimes we forget that services could add to that. Like, for example, if it's a marketing company doing work for a Canadian company and providing them with marketing materials and whatnot so that they can market themselves in a different country, that could be applicable. But my favorite story from this happened last year. We were talking to an agency that places
Oh, I
hockey
was hoping you were going to
players.
tell this one.
So, an agency that places hockey players into the US. And we were looking at that and we said, hey, we could actually classify Canadian hockey players as a Canadian export. So the mandate piece is very broad. It's all like we do look into the story of this whole thing. And one thing I would suggest, both for the companies who are listening to us and for consultants, let's say, that don't disregard something as an export or indirect export on our behalf. Give us a call, let us have a chat and see what we can do. Because we might get to a place where we would be able to qualify that. And it's always good to have conversation. Rob always likes to say, let's throw the spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks.
I love that. And you guys are super open to having conversations, even if they don't end up in a monetized transaction. So I think we've seen that over and over again, that both you, Samir, Rob, and many of your other colleagues across Canada actually are very open to having conversations, regardless of whether that results in a win or a transaction that EDC supports. So I think that's excellent value that you guys are providing all the businesses that are trying to grow and explore their opportunities. So what trends, I mean, this is the real like elephant in the room type of thing, right? If you guys could figure out the trends, going back to Rob's discussion of his crystal ball and how he'd go to a beach, but we know that's not true. He'd stay at EDC. He loves export too much. But I know you don't have a crystal ball, and I know that there's restrictions on what you're allowed to talk about. But how are you guys adapting to the trends right now? I mean, one of the things I've seen is you've been quick and really resourceful in terms of getting webinars out there and decks and research and information. So on behalf of everyone that's attended those and used that information during this time of uncertainty and volatility. We see that and we thank you for that. That's obviously one of the ways you're adapting and it's seen in the market. But what else are you guys doing to adapt to the trends that we're seeing and the volatility and the market?
I would say that the volatility is there, and it's hard to navigate through waters when you don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to say in the next hour. So, but what EDC has committed is that we are utilizing our existing products and making them broader and a little bit more like supporting ways where we would traditionally not support, utilizing the same products to do that. Well, and EDC has always been a good supporter of the Canadian companies during turmoil. Like, for example, during the COVID crisis, we had specialized loans. But, once we understood what was happening, we were able to provide those loans. And I was actually talking to a company last week that they told me that our loan, in addition with some of the subsidies for wages, helped them sustain the business during COVID, which made me very happy to hear that kind of positive remarks. So right now, well, like during a situation where it's very fluid, we enhance some of capabilities to the existing products, and we have pledged $5 billion of our own capital towards helping companies go through this. And just to be clear, this is EDC's capital. EDC is a self-sustaining organization, so we are a net dividend payer to the government. We don't receive payments from the government. So this is our own capital that we're putting towards the help of Canadian companies.
In terms of some of the trends, I'm going to say 75% of Canada's exports used to just go south. And I think the comfort of what that used to be will always be a little bit disrupted. So it's now a think global. And we need to start thinking a little bit differently about how we go to market, where we go to market, and what's that look like. I also think there's going to be a lot more in terms of working with Canadian companies and other Canadian companies as a whole to say, is there ability for us to look at JVs and consortiums to be able to leverage other people's knowledge and expertise, bid on larger and bigger contracts, and start taking on the world on a different way. I think Canada is in a great position to not waste a good crisis and grow from it. And it's figuring out new ways to do that. Now, in terms of surviving some of the stuff that's going on right now, supplier bonds have been a huge topic of conversation. So being able to go through and make sure that if you're taking on new suppliers to help diversify where you're getting stuff from, being able to get terms and conditions by offering suppliers a supplier bond are a hot topic right now. We're starting to see a lot more companies look at hedging programs within managing their currency, but requiring cash to post the mark to market. So we've been talking to a lot of companies about helping them post that foreign exchange guarantees to either their banks or the groups like Alpha Group or eBury to manage their FX. And then I'm seeing a lot more conversations about accounts receivable insurance. So being able to leverage that as a tool to vet your buyers to find out, do I want to do business with them? Can they pay me if we move forward with this? Or am I going down a silly goose chase that could have been spent with somebody else for a more meaningful contract?
So we have a question from one of the members in terms of legal bills. So let's say you do sign a contract that's a goose chase and, hindsight's 2020 and you regret it. And now you've got yourself some legal issues. Does EDC assist in terms of those costs and financially supporting businesses, or is that's not part of the service?
No, unfortunately, that's not part of the service. What we do is on commercial terms. So it'd be a lot more about um, our accounts receivable insurance policies or guaranteeing the bank, any of those other types of costs in terms of development or learning opportunities come from the client's side of things.
So it's more about that proactive mitigating risk and looking at opportunity, which is the trend of a lot of our discussion today. So that's good to clarify for people. So we're going to wrap up pretty quick. If anyone has any additional questions, this is your last chance to ask them. So please make sure to get them to me, and we'll see if we can hit a few more. Before we wrap up with Samir and Rob, I just want to quickly interrupt and remind you that the live AHA with Amplify is small group. It's going to be a roundtable session. We're talking employee experience, and we've got some really great experts to help us with onboarding, retaining, recruiting, offboarding, all conversations that matter for each of you, because I know every one of you is a team leader and that your employees matter to you. So please do look at signing up for the live event. In addition, we're going to talk capital gains and organizational structure and wealth for business owners in May, and shred in June, and then we'll be taking the summer off. So back to the EDC conversation as we wrap up our last few things that we want to talk about. One of the things we alluded to, but we didn't spend a ton of time on, is how you work with other banks. So I just want to re-emphasize that. So everybody here, whether they're a CPA leading the finance and accounting department or a business owner, they probably have a banker. Well, they certainly have a banker because they're not using a mattress, right? So they've got a relationship manager, they've got a bank. How could they work with that bank to get more from that relationship and that situation and bring EDC in? You guys are great at partnering with banks. I think I don't know what percentage of your clients are in correlation with the banks, but maybe you could talk a bit about that and let us know, how do you work with the banks and how can we make sure that we're leveraging the banks and the relationships we have to get more and to mitigate the risk, like how they look at us, so that we can get better credit and better access to funds. So tell me a bit about how you work with other banks.
I'm going to say that we're probably the bank's best friend. I hope that the bankers have the same sentiment towards us as we do towards them. But I think the biggest thing is for us is if there is not enough risk appetite from a bank at the moment, maybe the company doesn't have enough local security to get an additional line of credit to be able to perform on these new large projects, or maybe their capital is tied up with some collateral and all that. So I would say that we're there to find ways to help banks do more with the customers, even in the perspective of AR insurance that we talked upon. Typically, you're unable to get funds against receivables from a foreign country. However, if you're insuring those receivables, you're able to utilize it, go to the bank and say, hey, bank, it's now insured by EDC. Will you be able to add that to my basis for getting more funds? So I do believe that us and the bankers are best friends, but we are bank agnostic. We're not there to try to say, hey, this bank is better for your business than this bank. No, we don't do that. We work with all of the Canadian banks, and we go and we have those conversations together with the client, with the banker, and kind of try to be that bridge when there's a need for us.
You guys are going to have our email addresses and contact information as part of that pitch deck too. So by all means, call us directly, and we can help you in terms of where we might slot in with the banking relationship, but based on what you guys are trying to do, or just look at your banker and say, how do you think EDC can make this deal better?
And remind me, do you work with the credit unions and ATB as well, or is it just the national banks?
We do work with some credit unions, for sure. All of the Scheduled 1 banks as part of that list, and then it's the majority of the ones that we CWB, I guess now National, ATB, Van City, I think was a couple. There is the quite a few different ones that we have on our capabilities list. It really ties down to how many, like, are they international in terms of what they're trying to do.
Excellent.
And I would just say that because we have such a big band of products, not all the banks have the same product suite that we offer, but we work with all of them.
Great to know. So we're coming to the end, and I just wanted to double check. Is there anything, Rob, that you want to reemphasize or let our members know in terms of EDC and trade and exporting? You mentioned your whole career has practically been in exporting. What keeps you in this business?
Everything's different. Like every deal is a little bit different. It's great getting to know clients and hearing what they're doing and helping them do that. That really is what kind of jives me in terms of doing stuff. In terms of what I would leave them with is start now, don't wait, start looking at things. Even if it doesn't materialize into something right away, you're further down that journey for when you are really needing to or wanting to. And that our export mandate is wider than you think it is. So don't self rule out of what you're doing and where we might be able to help and support. Reach out to us and let us sort of say where we think we might be able to knit together a mandate story for you.
Excellent. I think those are really, really important points. That proactive, do the research, find the opportunities long before you require the opportunity or you need it. It might take a lot longer than you think, and you probably don't want a gun to your head in terms of being rushed to get yourself new markets. And don't assume that you're not an exporter, because there's a lot of things that Rob and Samir know and understand that could qualify you as an exporter, even though that's not how you see yourself or identify. So I think those are really important points. I love it. Samir, how about yourself? I haven't seen you happier since I met you, since you've joined EDC. I know you're winning and you're succeeding. What's making that happen? What do you want people to know about EDC and trade as we wrap this up?
I think the biggest thing about EDC is don't view EDC as an organization that is trying to sell something. We're there to support. So remember that we're in the support mechanism, and all of our products, we don't have to be there once we entered for your all lifespan. Let us be there, get you to help you get to the next stage, and we can leave afterwards. So we're happy to do that. A couple of things just to say at the end is that this is not a sprint. This is a marathon when you're entering new markets. It don't have to go and start big, like get that Costco contract, try something small wins, and then you can go to bigger wins and bigger wins. I think do take into account the the fact that some markets they're easier to penetrate than others, and that there's less barriers, for example, from a cultural perspective entering, like, let's say, the Australian market. Like it's a more similar market, more safer market, so you can start with something like that. But it will give you all but going to Australia will help you out in terms of navigating the logistics challenges and other challenges, right? So there is a way to start slowly, dip in your toes and go in. And then remember, there's a lot of support mechanisms starting from, let's say, the Trade Accelerator program offered by Calgary Economic Development, for example. If you don't know anything about exporting, go, it's a free program, sign up to it, start preparing. And then, of course, Trade Commissioner Services, trade teams at the Government of Alberta, us, and other BDC has an ability to provide business plans for international expansions and all that. So utilize those mechanisms that are available. There's a lot of free ones, and once you get through the free ones, you can look at some of the more paid ones, and but it's going to be decrease the cost anyways because you already did a lot of your research yourselves.
I think this was very useful. I think it's interesting because you guys made the point that export can seem so, so big and just big companies and it can't be me. And sometimes EDC can feel the same way, right? It's big and it's national and we don't know how it applies to us. And I think everybody that took the time today to hear the stories, the examples, the services are going to recognize that they might be an exporter and that EDC might have a place in their growth plan. And I'm really happy that we were able to provide that information to our members. So we'll definitely share that deck. And I definitely encourage you to get to know Samir and Rob. If you don't know them, they are very generous with their knowledge and connections and information. And it's helped Amplify and many of our clients, and I know it could help you too. I appreciate all your time. That's a wrap, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thank you
having
so
us.
much. Thank you.